welcome to another edition of our MirrorTV. Cory Giger, joined by Rudel and Ray Eckenrode. Wanted to kind of talk about the Penn State coaching job a little bit. There was an interesting quote that appeared in a paper yesterday attributed to an agent who represents a number of college football coaches. He called the Penn State job, quote, a toxic situation, and said that everybody is steering clear of it. I thought what we would do would be to kind of rate what we think the Penn State job is, how good of a job it is at this point, given the fact that we're here near Christmas. So I asked Neil and Ray to kind of think of a number between 1 and 10 to rate the Penn State job, with 1 being toxic and 10 being a tremendous job like an Alabama or a Texas or an LSU maybe. What do you think, Neil?
Well, there's probably the last time we heard toxic, it was in reference to their bowl chances to go to Florida, and that may have, in fact, turned out to be a little bit true, at least with the Gator Bowl. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. Again, I mean, there's some people that probably say, you know what, I'm not going to touch that job right now, and then there's other people that may really want the job that they may not hire. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in the middle, maybe 5, 6, 7.
As low as 5, you think? I'll just go ahead and say my number is 7. I would have thought 2 months ago it was 9. But that's kind of the question I want to ask is, it is still Penn State. They've got 100,000 seats. They've got great tradition and facilities and all of that. I just wonder if some of these coaches aren't looking at this and they're kidding themselves, because what this job could be 2-3 years from now versus what it is maybe today, I don't quite get the whole toxic aspect of it.
I agree. I think you just made the right distinction, and that's if you're looking at little picture versus big picture. Big picture, I don't think there's any doubt it's still a 7 or 8 job on that scale. If you're talking about over the next year, it may be, but I mean, you know, you're not hiring a coach, hopefully, unless his name's Todd Graham. You're not hiring a coach for 1 year, you know. So I think if you look at the big picture, Penn State is still an attractive job, certainly not toxic. And as I've said off camera, I don't know how much stock you can put into an anonymous quote from an agent who has a financial stake in the matter. You know, it sounds like something, you know, one of those things that's maybe said for effect more than the truth of the matter.
Well, clearly the next year or 2, maybe even 3, is going to be difficult for whoever gets the job. Recruiting is going to be difficult, answering all the questions. But again, that tough year or 2, you're going to have that in a lot of jobs that you take over.
You are, but what you don't know is what's coming around the corner. And do you want to deal with negative headlines? If you're an up-and-coming coach that could be attractive to a lot of places, especially if you're a non-Penn State person, I could see why, maybe at one time, and maybe it'll still happen, maybe a Mark Richt, who has been kind of beaten up in Georgia, was looking for a change and would consider, you know, a job like this. But maybe right now he just says, you know, I don't know if I want to get into that. Same with Chris Peterson. People that don't have ties, I think this could have the potential to scare them off.
So don't you think then they're going to get stuck with a coach who, as of 2 months ago, no one would have ever thought was anywhere near worthy of this job because of the Mark Ricks of the world, because of the Bo Pellinis of the world? They've all come out and flat said they don't want to touch this situation. So are they going to end up with a guy that would have never dreamed about getting this job?
I think they are, but whether they're stuck with that guy, quote unquote, I think depends on what kind of coach that guy turns out to be. But it's certainly, unless somebody has a pretty huge ace up their sleeve somewhere, it certainly looks like we're heading towards a lesser known coach.
Right. I mean, you would like to think that the longer it went, the more they would have to turn up an ace, but I don't know that it's really going that way. There are no signs of that. Now, to me, that ace has become Munchak. For if he would decide that he, you know, because that would explain why they're being very deliberate with this process, feeling out people and whatnot, interviewing several members of the current staff. So maybe they've been in no real rush. Munchak could be that ace in the hole.
Yeah, Neil's theory on that is maybe they're waiting for the NFL season to end or the bowl season to end, and they take. And I think that's a good idea, because otherwise, why are you waiting so long?
Except that you've accepted this bowl bid, and you I guess expect this current staff to keep the roof on the building, which they haven't necessarily done, you know, with this one incident that they've had and just some other stuff that they're dealing with. So I thought maybe that was a reason to defer to these guys that have gotten through this turbulent time. They said, but I think it's maybe more the opposite of they're looking at somebody who's either in a bowl or in the NFL.
And you not just to take that, you wait this long because you want to get it exactly right, even if that ends up costing you a recruiting class in the short term.
Yeah.
And a rough year, which you're going to have anyway.
Are they waiting this long because everybody's saying no?
And that's what's so intriguing about this is you can cast a scenario sort of on either end of the spectrum about why the process is drawn out, and there's really for how quickly things happen in college football and how rumors float around. I mean, there certainly are message board rumors out there, but there's still a pretty tight lid on this thing as far as anything that's going on. Now, that may indicate Munchak, or it may indicate that they got nowhere to go.
Right, but I got to give them credit because I think when you're, internally at a big decision like this, if you're going to have a lot of loose cannons on that committee that are winking and nodding at every media member around, I think they've preserved some integrity into this search.
The one thing I want to close on is how quickly we think Penn State can get back to a level of being even, we've always kind of thought a 12 to 15 level program, not necessarily a top 10 level program, but I think they're going to take a major hit for a year or two, this recruiting class. But don't you think that 3 years from now, 2014, and then that's where I kind of go with my 7 on the 1 to 10 scale, is I think by the time of 2014, 2015, we'll still be talking about Penn State football as a player in the Big Ten and somewhat on the national stage. Is that too early, or you think it's further down the road?
And I think the first thing, in a very broad way, I think that's a good assessment. But obviously, specifically, you want to see what happens when a new coach is named and who I mean, I think it's a given that you're not going to get the kind of recruiting class you thought you were going to. The question becomes who of the current guys who are there, how many and who leaves before you make. But I don't think 3 years, especially the way things go in college sports, I don't think that's overly optimistic for a time frame to be back in a top 15 program.
They really have underachieved for the better part of the decade. So I don't think on the field Joe will be as difficult to replace as it will be image-wise, and the fact that they were an automatic TV draw. Bowls seemed to smile on them, up until this year. So, I think it will take a couple years for all the fallout to settle down. But I think if you can really coach them up more than they have, and that the one thing I think is a little disappointing is if you lose most of this defensive staff, which you're going to be. You look at all the great players in the NFL right now that are Penn State grads, and that's going to be unfortunate.
Real quick closing thought. I'll just close by saying that I think all these coaches around the country that might be looking at this and want no part of it whatsoever, I think 5 years from now they could really regret it, because I think that it's going to be very difficult for a year or two, but I think that coach would also come in here and be given a lot of leeway and a lot of benefit of the doubt by many people, fans, media included. I think yes, it would be very difficult, but these guys 5 years from now won't necessarily be candidates for the job if they hire the right guy and Penn State becomes what Penn State is again. Meanwhile, they can stay at the jobs that they're at and maybe get fired or have not much success over the next 5 years, and then they'll look back and say, man, maybe I should have taken that Penn State
situation.
Well,
that's what I wonder about Munchak. I mean, okay, he's getting an opportunity in Tennessee, and that's where he's been with that organization his whole career. But how long is the shelf life? What's the life expectancy of an NFL head coach? 6.5 years?
Without a franchise quarterback, it's very short.
Yeah.
Right.
You think that any coach is making a mistake by not necessarily wanting to tackle the situation?
I don't, and I think when you step back and take the long view, the core of what made Penn State's program what it was for all those decades is still there. It's still there. The things that made Penn State are still going to be there in the long run. And then you touched on the other thing. This is now a job where there is a reasonable and acceptable honeymoon period that there would not have been otherwise. So strictly from a college football point of view, I think there's still a lot there to speak well for the job. I agree with you when you say it's still a 7, and I mean, it's not outlandish to say in a decade it's a 9 again.
All right, for Ray Eckenrode, Rudel, I'm Cory Giger. Thanks for tuning in.